Hello there, today I am Black Bright News and I wanted to talk to those men who have been reading the headlines recently about national emergency about reducing violence on women and who might be in violent relationships thinking, what about me? So this video is for those who feel alone, isolated, and who feel that no one's taking their situation into account. So if I was a man reading the headline stories today, seeing that violence against women and girls is being called a national emergency, my first thought would be, what about me? Who is speaking for me? Where is my protection? Because even though I understand the urgency of that crisis, I would also feel invisible. I would feel the gnawing, uncomfortable sense that my own fear, my own pain doesn't fully exist in the public conversation. I would feel a heaviness settle in my chest and a quiet panic because I know what it feels like to be afraid in your own home, to feel unsafe in a place you should feel secure. I remember what it felt like when I was younger, living under someone's unpredictable anger, never knowing what would set them off. The sound of a key in the lock could make your body stiffen, your heart race. Every word you choose carefully, every glance measured, every movement cautious. The fear is relentless, and yet, in that same moment, your first thought isn't to call for help, it's to survive, it's to stay silent, to keep hidden. Because speaking out might make it worse, because admitting the truth feels like weakness, because you don't know who you can trust. I imagine that's how many men might feel when they read headlines about a national emergency in abuse. They see attention being given, solutions being rolled out, statistics being measured, and they want to hope that help exists for everyone, and yet there is that familiar knot of doubt. Will it help me? Will it be enough? When you've lived fear every day, when you've learned to protect yourself by staying quiet, the idea that a protection order or a policy can keep you safe feels distant. Because on paper, safety is simple. In reality, it's never simple. The government is rolling out new measures like domestic abuse protection orders, which are designed to shield victims from harm. Thousands of people have been protected by them, and that is important. But when I read about these measures, my heart instinctively questions, will it hold? Will someone I trusted, someone who has hurt me, be restrained, or will the cycle continue? Will the law protect me in the moments that matter most, when fear grips your chest and your body tenses for what might come next? And that is the male voice speaking there as opposed to me speaking. Because I've kind of composed this, for men, and sometimes I've kind of switched it up a little bit. I think about men who are feeling that fear right now. Maybe they've never spoken about it. Maybe they never will, because shame and embarrassment are as heavy as the fear itself. Because society often assumes that men cannot be victims, that vulnerability is a failing. And yet the emotions are real, the trauma is real, the longing for safety is real. Reading the headlines, some men may feel gratitude that abuse is finally being taken seriously, but also a painful reminder of their own invisibility. And then when it comes to men finally leaving those relationships, the fear doesn't end, the isolation doesn't end. In fact, it often grows. There's the crushing reality of being expected to cope, homelessness, mental health, struggles, exhaustion, the weight of fear and trauma. Suddenly you're left to navigate a system that often assumes you are strong enough to manage on your own. There are shelters, yes, but many are designed for women. Support services exist, yes, but men are often overlooked and society quietly expects you to carry on, to be resilient, to get over it. That is when the cracks appear. Men who were surviving in silence suddenly have nowhere to hide, no one to advocate for them, no one to ensure their safety. Mental health struggles may surface. The pressure to appear okay can push someone past the breaking point. And that is the part nobody talks about, the men who fall through the cracks, left to fend for themselves until finally they can't. So when I read the headlines about domestic abuse protection orders, my heart reacts with a mix of hope and fear. On paper, there is protection, and that is vital, but when fear has been a constant companion, you can't help but wonder, will it really keep me safe? Or is it just a temporary barrier? Will the cycle resume the moment I let my guard down? The paper may promise safety, but the lived experience tells you to doubt until you see the results for yourself. Abuse does not discriminate. It's not measured by gender, and the human reaction, the instinctive response, is always to survive, to hide, to protect yourself. Even if it means protecting the abuser from consequences, even if it means remaining silent while the fear continues to grow inside you. That's how I reacted. I knew the rules. I knew the world. I knew the possible consequences, and I kept my pain to myself, because when you are afraid, silence seems like the only way forward. But here's the truth I want to reach through to anyone listening. Survival alone is not enough. Fear is not a life. Pain is not meant to be carried in isolation. There are people who can help. There are systems in place to protect. There are voices ready to listen. And the first step, even the tiniest, quietest step, is to reach out, to speak to someone you trust, even if it's just one person. Because believing you are seen, that someone understands, can be enough to start reclaiming your life. Safety, dignity and compassion are not conditional. They are for every human being who is living in fear. And even though the headlines focus on one side of this crisis, the emotions are universal. Fear, isolation, uncertainty. These are feelings that any victim of abuse experiences, and they deserve to be acknowledged, not minimized, not forgotten. As Black Bright News, I always remind myself that headlines are only the surface. Behind every statistic, every measure, every policy, there are real people, breathing, surviving, struggling, hoping. And as we recognise the crisis of violence against women and girls, we must also remember that men who are abused often suffer in silence, and that their stories are no less urgent, they're just quieter, often hidden, sometimes dismissed, but their pain is real and their need for protection is real. To anyone living in that fear, in that isolation, you are not alone. You are seen, even if it doesn't always feel that way. Your feelings are valid, your experience is real, and even in the darkest moments, there is hope. There are people who will believe you, who will listen without judgment, who will help you take the steps towards safety. Because at the heart of this, at the very human core, the need is simple: safety, understanding, care and compassion. And when we acknowledge that for every victim, regardless of gender, we begin to break the silence, to honour the unseen, to give voice to the hidden fear that has been carried too long. And in doing so, we remind everyone listening that no one should feel invisible, no one should feel unsafe in their own home, no one should feel alone. Safety, justice and human dignity are not privileges. For some, they are rights for all. And when we remember that, we truly sit with that truth. We start to create a world where every story matters, every voice is heard, and every human being can live without fear. Because even when fear feels overwhelming, even when shame feels heavy, the knowledge that someone cares, the knowledge that your story matters, can be the spark that keeps you moving forward. And that is the story we need to hold on to, not just today, but every day. And I know that some of you think of yourselves as tick boxes. Oh, I'm just a tick box, I don't really care. But even those tick boxes can lead to something else, but you need to take the first step safely and protecting your way in every way you can. So I hope that touches the hearts it's supposed to touch. And yeah, I think I'll leave it there for now. Take care.